Open your cerebral cortex and shift your lobes into upper beta phase because you are going to have Bitcoin knowledge transmitted directly into your vestibulocochlear. Your host of Bitcoin Knowledge is Trace Mayer, an early Bitcoin advocate since it cost $0.25, but this is not intended to be investment advice. A doctor of jurisprudence, but this is definitely not legal advice. And an investor in core cryptocurrency infrastructure, including Armory, BitPay, Kraken, and Nitagio, but this is not a recommendation of those services. Here, you get fed via direct mind download with pure and free Bitcoin knowledge.
Hi, my name is Eric Lombrozo. I'm a Bitcoin Core contributor and also Ciphrex CEO. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about protocol upgrades and the difference between hard forks and soft forks. As opposed to a lot of other kinds of software systems, Bitcoin has a very big problem with the deployment logistics whenever there's any change in the protocol. And this is because the way that Bitcoin works requires all the nodes to agree on consensus rules. This is very important because this is what determines what transactions end up considered valid on the network. And if different people disagree, then there's going to be different histories that can be incompatible, and different people might think that different people own different amounts of Bitcoin. And obviously, this is not good. So, in most kinds of software systems, when you do a version upgrade, usually the new version is released in a way where people can download and upgrade, the upgrade and install it, and the file formats can be made backwards or forwards compatible so that the new software can read the old formats. And usually it's just not too big of a problem because different documents can be converted back and forth, and it's pretty simple for people to be able to migrate. Also, with network applications or with like things like web browsers, it's simple for people to add new features to the protocol, and new browsers that do not, or old browsers that do not support the feature can just simply show like an empty box or something that shows that that feature is not supported. That's not a big problem with these kinds of systems, but in the case of a decentralized consensus network like Bitcoin, you cannot do this, because if not everyone agrees on exactly what's valid, then this invalidates the whole premise of the system, which is that everyone needs to agree on the same history. So the actual data structures that are used to send information back and forth between nodes have version numbers, but these version numbers cannot just be changed and then have new software that can just detect the new ones and the old ones ignore it, because everything in Bitcoin requires cryptographic signatures. All the data that's put there must be hashed, and all the commitments are based on these things hashing to the correct values and the signatures signing the correct data, which means that if a particular software does not understand a particular data field and it cannot validate it, it makes it really, really difficult to make sure that everyone's going to agree on the same history. So fast forward a little bit from the beginning of Bitcoin, and when you then had to have this deployment of a new set of protocol rules, the deployment logistics became a really big issue, because now it was not so easy to just have everyone come to download the new version of the software upon release and expect everyone to be able to do it in a timely fashion. There might be some people that either don't want to upgrade right away, or can't upgrade, or maybe didn't get the message, etc. So this creates a really big logistics problem. So soft forks were discovered as a way to be able to deploy new rules to the network, and getting around a lot of the complications of this. You still want everyone to upgrade eventually, because when you're changing the rules, if there's rules you cannot validate, then you're not getting the complete security of the system. However, any kind of protocol change that changes the validation rules is going to require everyone to eventually upgrade if they really do want to be able to validate the rules, whether it's a hard fork or a soft fork. But in the case of a soft fork, we're only adding new rules. We're not removing any of the validation rules that are already there. This means that things that were valid in the past might become invalid, because now there's another check that needs to pass before it's considered valid. But stuff that was invalid in the past will still continue to fail all the tests. So this is still something that allows us to have a heterogeneous network with nodes that support the old rules and the new rules on the network at the same time, and still be able to pass messages back and forth to each other, and still agree on the same history. The miners do have to upgrade though, because miners are the ones that actually, you know, actually secure the transactions and make sure that the history, that the history actually ends up converging. So miners do need to upgrade, but the rest of the ecosystem, if it doesn't all upgrade immediately, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to split the network. It's not going to create, disagreements on the transaction history. In the case of a hard fork, you can have a situation where rules that where things that were valid but were invalid before become valid, and what this means is that now you have a situation where different nodes might treat the same data as one might treat something as being valid while the other one treats it as being invalid, and there really is no way to consolidate this. It doesn't converge on a particular history. In the case of a soft fork, you do have a convergence. What happens is after the soft fork activates, the nodes that were validating under the old rules are still going to converge on the node that's validating under the new rules, because the new rules are more strict. So anything that followed the old rules, anything that follows the new rules will also have followed the old rules. So this means that upon activation of the fork, as soon as the network transitions to the new rule, all the nodes are going to want to converge to the same history. In the case of a hard fork, this does not happen. In the case of a hard fork, what happens is once it activates, the network actually diverges. There's no convergence to this. Old nodes are going to get pushed off into a separate network, and they're not going to converge onto the same network as the new nodes. So this is a very significant problem for activation. In the case of a soft fork, if say 95% of miners are only accepting blocks that follow the new rules, there's a very, very, very little incentive for anyone to try to, change the rules at that point, because everyone's going to converge to that. Even if someone tries to spam the network with a whole bunch of stuff, or even like spend a lot of money to try to mine blocks that do not fit that are invalid, eventually the network is going to tend towards the new rules. In the case of a hard fork, this is not the case. Even if there's a minority fork that represents, that is forked off, they could still, lobby sufficient miners to try to get more hash rate. And if they're able to flip the hash rate again, then that creates a huge reorganization of the entire network, of the entire blockchain, and they can actually force the rules to change back again. In the case of a soft fork, this only happens when the rule does not activate. When the rule does not activate, miners could still try to force the rule to activate later, but this is a power that miners already have. Miners can already select which transactions, even if they're valid, they want to include in their blocks or not. So this isn't actually giving miners any additional powers that they didn't have before. It just coordinates it so that everyone is on the same page and understands that there's a rule change happening. And this is where signaling comes in. This is where something like BIP9 comes into play. It's not really a voting mechanism. We don't want to politicize mining in Bitcoin, because this really defeats the core security premise of Satoshi's idea. If you can have 51% of the network agree on some rule that's hostile to the other 49%, this is a big problem. This is a very destabilizing force on the system, and if this is able to happen, most likely the network will not be able to stay together. It'll fragment. So in the case of something like BIP9, you have a signaling which allows other nodes to know when a new rule is going to be activated, and to coordinate. So this is a logistics deployment issue where you are able to know whether other nodes are ready to process blocks with the new rules, and so that allows users to know whether it's safe to accept certain types of transactions or not that might have been valid under the old rules that were not being validated by the old nodes. So once sufficient network hash power exists that can actually validate the transactions and commit to that history, then it becomes safe for people to accept that kind of new the transactions that must also obey that new rule. And amazingly, it turns out that by even though at first it seemed like soft forks were a very serious limitation as far as what we could do, we could not change any rule however we want. It turns out that we can actually support almost any new feature by carving out a space within this new set of validation rules that we can add to the system. So it turns out that there's actually very few things that cannot be added to the network with a soft fork. And this eliminates all the issues pertaining to flag days and making sure that everyone's upgraded on time. And if not, then, people being thrown off the network. And so this is why soft forks are considered generally much, much safer. This does not mean that we can solve all problems with soft forks. But soft forks are something that we've already done before many times. It's something that we've gotten good at doing, and we've done it securely many times in the past. Whereas hard forks are something that we've never done intentionally. We've never actually deployed an intentional hard fork, and it's going to still require quite a bit of research to make sure how we to figure out how we can do it and to be able to do it safely. In addition, soft forks also allow us to deploy multiple protocol changes simultaneously. And not really care in which order they activate, which is something that's much harder to coordinate with hard forks. The reason why activation order is more flexible with soft forks is because the rule changes must be structured in a way that they're usually composable. Not all the time. There are some situations where maybe one rule depends on another. But in general, if you just have a sequence of checks where the first one that fails the whole operation and all of them need to pass, it makes it pretty simple to architect a system where you can compose different rules and not really care in which order they necessarily get checked, which means that you could have multiple soft forks deployed simultaneously and have them activate in different orders and not really care. It's not going to break the network in any of those, whichever way it happens. One last thing I want to say about hard forks or about forks in general, but this is more of a problem with hard forks, is that if there's a politically divisive climate, if there's any kind of if the community is really split on any divisive issue, it becomes much more dangerous to deploy any kind of protocol rule change. We really think that in order to do these deployments safely, we need to have more of the community together, willing to cooperate. If there's any issues, if there's like a problem between like miners and developers, and there needs to be some coordination to fix the issue, and they're mad at each other, obviously this is not going to be a good thing for any of us. So it's very important that we cooperate and that we're able to build consensus in the community before we actually deploy this and activate it. And it is my own personal belief that if we cannot do that, then the safest thing to do is to stick with the status quo. I would love to see a lot of changes to the network, to the rules in the network, a lot of new features that we think are really cool that we want to add to it. I think that we need to work on being better at making the case for why it's a good idea to have that stuff take place. And in the case of a hard fork, this is much more dangerous because of the lack of convergence issue. You can really have two separate networks form out of it that are hostile to one another, fighting against each other, attacking one another, and this is going to get really ugly. It's not good for us. It's not good for business. It's not going to do good things for Bitcoin. So we really don't want to see that happen.
Be sure to get a copy of the free Bitcoin Guide at freebitcoinguide.com. Got a question or suggestion? Record your voice at bitcoin.kn. Don't be shy. To help the show, share bitcoin.kn with friends, post about it on Reddit, and otherwise spam the interwebs. Your iTunes comments and 5-star reviews are very important to us. Please continue tuning in to the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast, where we release interviews with the top people in the Bitcoin world. Now take some choline and let that Bitcoin knowledge consolidate.